The morning sun slid through the half-raised roll-up door of the garage, cutting the air into pale stripes. Dust floated lazily in those beams, turning each breath into something visible. The smell was familiar and heavy: hot oil, rusted metal, and a faint trace of salt carried in from the ocean a few blocks away. Daniel Kowalski wiped his hands on an old rag that had once been white. The grease never really came off anymore. It had settled into his skin, into the lines of his palms, as permanent as a second set of fingerprints. He had learned to live with that. Some things, once absorbed, did not wash away. The garage sat wedged between an aging industrial strip and a narrow residential street where paint peeled from fences and the sidewalks buckled with time. It had been his father's once. Then it had been his. Now it was everything: home, workplace, refuge. Danny liked the honesty of it. Machines came in broken. If you listened closely enough, they told you why. Inside, the steady clink of metal tools echoed softly. A socket wrench tapped against concrete. An old radio murmured low, the signal drifting in and out with static and distant voices. Danny preferred it that way. Silence had a habit of letting memories talk too loudly. On the floor near the back wall, Zoe sat cross-legged with a small stack of paper balanced on her knees. She was 7, all sharp elbows and serious concentration. A pencil stub rested between her fingers, worn so short it barely reached her knuckles. She drew airplanes. Not neat ones. Not the kind that appeared in books. These had jagged wings, oversized engines, gears where there shouldn't be gears. She erased and redrew, smudging graphite across her palm. Her tongue caught between her teeth. Danny glanced over, smiling without realizing it. "You're going to run out of paper," he said. Zoe didn't look up. "That's okay. I'll fix it." That was her answer to most things. Danny nodded and went back to the engine block in front of him. The metal was warm under his hands, responsive. He loosened a bolt and felt the subtle shift in tension. Machines, at least, obeyed logic. The neighborhood noise stayed constant. A delivery truck downshifted. Somewhere a gull cried. Everything moved the way it always had. Then a different sound slid into the street. It wasn't loud. That was the strange part. It was smooth and deep, a controlled purr that didn't belong among rattling sedans and tired pickups. The air itself seemed to adjust around it. Danny straightened slowly. The engine noise stopped just outside the garage. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the reflection of sunlight shifted across the concrete floor, bright and clean, like a blade. Danny stepped toward the doorway and froze. A white Rolls-Royce Cullinan sat at the curb, its surface polished so perfectly it mirrored the sky. It looked unreal there, like a prop wheeled onto the wrong set. The neighborhood bent awkwardly around it, as if unsure how to exist in the same frame. Zoe stood up beside him without being told. "Is that a movie car?" she whispered. Danny didn't answer. The rear door opened slowly, deliberately. A young woman emerged, moving with careful precision. Metal braces encased her legs, running from hip to ankle, catching the light with every shift of weight. She paused, steadying herself, jaw tight. The sound came then, a faint metallic rasp, soft but unmistakable, each movement accompanied by a restrained protest of metal against metal. Her face was pale, framed by dark hair pulled back loosely. She was young, 19 maybe, but her eyes carried a tiredness that had nothing to do with age. She adjusted her posture, searching for a position that hurt a little less. Behind her stepped an older woman, tall and immaculate, dressed in a white suit that seemed immune to dust. Her posture was rigid, controlled. She scanned the garage with a quick, assessing glance, as though cataloging imperfections. "Sorry to bother you," she said. Her voice was calm, clipped. "Our car overheated. Can you take a look?" Danny nodded automatically. "Yeah, of course." As he lifted the hood, his attention kept drifting back. Not to the car, but to the girl on the bench. She shifted again. The metal whispered its complaint. Her shoulders tightened, just slightly. Danny's hands stilled. He had spent his life noticing small misalignments, a vibration that shouldn't be there, a noise that arrived half a second too early. It was instinct sharpened by years of listening. The girl moved once more, and the sound came again. Wrong. Danny closed the hood and wiped his hands slowly. He walked over, lowering himself until he was level with her eyes. He didn't loom. He never did. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice gentle. "I don't mean to intrude." The girl looked startled, then wary. No one usually addressed her directly. Danny hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. The garage seemed to hold its breath. Even the radio faded into static. He glanced at the braces, at the angle of her knees, the way her hips compensated without her meaning them to. His mind traced invisible lines, measuring stress, imagining force. He met her gaze again. "Is your brace too tight?" The hospital lights were too white. They flattened everything beneath them, draining color from skin and thought alike. Danny remembered how they hummed faintly, a sound you didn't notice until the room fell quiet and there was nothing else left to hear. Miguel lay still in the narrow bed, his chest rising and falling with mechanical patience. Tubes traced a careful path across his body, clear and unforgiving. The monitor beside him kept time with soft beeps, each one a reminder that something fragile was still holding on. Danny sat close, one hand wrapped around his brother's. Miguel's fingers were thinner than Danny remembered, the skin warm but unfamiliar. Danny stared at that hand, at the way it rested so trustingly in his own, and felt a pressure in his chest he could not name. "It's not your fault," Miguel said quietly. Danny swallowed. "I should have found the money." Miguel smiled, small and crooked, the kind of smile he'd worn their whole lives, usually before doing something reckless. "You still have Zoe. Don't forget that." The machine breathed for him. In. "If you ever get the chance," Miguel went on, his voice barely more than air, "help people like me. Don't let them lose hope. Promise me." Danny nodded because words wouldn't come. He tightened his grip, feeling the faint squeeze returned. It was the last promise he would ever make to his brother. The memory loosened its hold slowly, like a hand releasing its grip. Back in the garage, the afternoon light had shifted. The Rolls-Royce sat silent now, its hood open, steam already dissipating. The older woman, Alexandra, she had said, stood a few feet away, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in low, controlled tones. The girl, Sienna, remained on the bench. She watched Danny with cautious curiosity, her eyes tracking his movements. "You asked about my brace," she said. Danny turned toward her. "If it's okay." She hesitated, then nodded. "You can look." He crouched again, careful, respectful. He didn't touch it first. He studied the angles, the alignment, the way the metal followed her legs without truly fitting them. When he finally reached out, he moved slowly, announcing each contact as if the brace itself could hear him. "May I?" he asked. "Yes," she said. His fingers traced the joint at her knee. It was rigid, locked in place. He frowned slightly, shifting his focus to the hip assembly. The more he looked, the more something unsettled him. The design was elegant, expensive. Sensors gleamed beneath the casing, but elegance was not the same as truth. "How long have you been wearing this?" he asked. 5 years, Sienna said. "They said it would get easier." "Did it?" She shook her head. "It hurts less some days, but it never feels right." Alexandra turned sharply. "She's seen the best specialists in the country," she said. "This device was designed by a team from MIT. Danny nodded. "I'm sure it was." He didn't argue. He never did. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying Sienna's posture. The way her spine tilted just a fraction. The way her shoulders compensated without her noticing. He stood and stepped away, giving them space. "I need to finish the car," he said. "It'll take about 15 minutes. As he worked, his mind didn't let go. It rarely did once something felt wrong. He loosened a clamp, adjusted a hose, but his thoughts stayed with the brace. With angles and force and the quiet ways systems failed when they forgot the body they were meant to serve. That night, after the Rolls-Royce pulled away and the street returned to its familiar rhythm, Danny locked the garage door and dimmed the lights. Zoe slept in the small room partitioned off with plywood, her breathing soft and even. Danny sat at the workbench under a single yellow bulb. He opened his laptop. The screen glowed against the darkness. He searched for gate mechanics, for orthopedic design, for anything that might explain the wrongness he felt in his bones. Videos played silently, diagrams flashing by. He paused on one clip, rewound it, slowed it down. A warning appeared briefly at the bottom of the screen. Unauthorized modification of Class 2 medical devices violates FDA regulations. Danny watched it disappear as quickly as it had come. He took a pencil and began to sketch. Lines at first, then shapes, knees bending, hips rotating. The pencil moved with confidence, guided by years of translating motion into understanding. Somewhere between midnight and morning, he realized the problem wasn't subtle. It was fundamental. The knee joint was fixed, locked at an angle that forced the rest of the body to compensate. Every step transferred stress upward, twisting the hip, pulling at the spine. It was engineering that prioritized stability over movement, control over trust. The door creaked softly. Sienna stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim hall light. Alexandra lingered behind her, arms crossed, watchful. "I couldn't sleep," Sienna said. "I kept thinking about what you said." Danny straightened, suddenly aware of how this must look. Sketches scattered across the table. Tools laid out with quiet intent. "I don't want to give you false hope," he said carefully. Sienna stepped closer, the metal whispering again. "I've lived with pain for 11 years, she said. "Hope isn't the thing that scares me." Danny met her gaze. He thought of Miguel, of Zoe asleep just beyond the wall, of promises that stayed with you long after the room went quiet. "I don't know if I can fix it," he said. His voice didn't waver. "But I can try." The garage felt smaller in daylight. Sunlight poured in through the open door, harsh and unfiltered, stripping away the softness of dust and shadow. Every flaw stood exposed. The concrete floor showed its cracks. The tools looked older. Even the air felt tight, as if it were holding something back. Alexandra Donovan stood near the entrance, her arms folded, her posture immaculate. She had removed her jacket but not her composure. Her eyes followed every movement Danny made, sharp and unblinking. "I want to be clear," she said. "If at any point this becomes unsafe, we stop." Immediately, Danny nodded. "Of course." Sienna sat on the bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked calm, but the stillness in her shoulders betrayed her. The metal braces caught the light, gleaming coldly. Each small shift produced a restrained metallic sound, a reminder that her body had learned to negotiate with pain rather than escape it. Danny lifted the modified brace from the workbench, prototype 1, lighter than before. The joints had been adjusted, the pressure points redistributed. It wasn't perfect. He knew that, but it was closer than anything she had worn before. He knelt in front of her. "I'll explain everything before I touch anything," he said. "And if you want me to stop, I stop." Sienna nodded once. "Okay." Alexandra stepped closer. "I'll be right here." The sound of metal tightening filled the garage as Danny worked. Click by click, strap by strap. The rhythm was methodical, deliberate. He checked alignment twice, then a third time. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Different," Sienna said. She took a careful breath. "Lighter." Danny stepped back. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving faint smears of grease. For a moment, no one spoke. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Sienna placed her hands on the bench and pushed herself up. The first movement was cautious, controlled. The brace responded smoothly. No immediate resistance. Danny felt his chest loosen just slightly. She stood. For a brief, suspended second, everything seemed to hold. Even the distant sounds of the street faded. Sienna's face remained still, focused. "It doesn't hurt," she said, surprised. Alexandra's breath caught. "Are you sure?" Sienna nodded. "Not yet." Danny raised a hand. "Don't rush. Let your body find the balance." Sienna shifted her weight. Her right foot moved forward. The brace adjusted with a soft mechanical whisper. The knee bent more freely than before. Hope crept in. Quietly, like a careful visitor afraid to overstay. Then it happened. The third step came down wrong. The metal joint slipped against her ankle, misaligned by just enough to matter. There was a sharp, unforgiving sound as pressure met skin where it shouldn't have. Sienna cried out. She collapsed sideways, the bench scraping loudly as her weight hit the concrete. Danny lunged forward, too late. Alexandra screamed her daughter's name. Blood spread quickly across Sienna's ankle, bright and startling against pale skin. It dripped onto the floor, each drop landing with a soft, terrible finality. "That's enough," Alexandra said, her voice shaking with fury and fear. "That's enough." Danny's hands hovered uselessly in the air, trembling. His mind raced through the sequence, the angles, the adjustments. He had missed something. A fraction. A detail. "I'm so sorry," he said. The words felt thin. Inadequate. Alexandra knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into her arms. "I should never have trusted this," she said, her voice breaking. "I knew better." Sienna winced but didn't cry again. She pressed her lips together, breathing carefully. Danny fetched a clean cloth, his movements automatic. He handed it to Alexandra without a word. "We're leaving," Alexandra said. She didn't look at him. This was a mistake. Danny nodded, unable to meet her eyes. The brace lay abandoned on the floor, streaked with red. No one touched it. When the Rolls-Royce door closed, the sound was final. The engine started, smooth and distant, then faded down the street. The garage fell silent. Danny stood alone in the doorway long after they were gone. The sunlight no longer felt warm. It felt accusatory. He looked down at the blood on the concrete, the way it had seeped into the fine cracks. It wouldn't come out easily. He didn't try to clean it. That night, he sat at the workbench without turning. On the lamp, darkness gathered around him, heavy and complete. Zoe slept behind the thin wall, unaware. Danny rested his elbows on the table and lowered his head into his hands. The image of Miguel in the hospital bed rose unbidden. The same helplessness, the same certainty that he had failed someone who trusted him. A soft knock broke the stillness. He looked up. Sienna stood just inside the door, leaning slightly against the frame. Her ankle was wrapped. Alexandra waited behind her, tense but silent. "I wanted to say something," Sienna said. Danny stood slowly. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said, "but I didn't want to leave without telling you." She met his eyes. There was pain there, yes, but there was also something else. Resolve. A quiet, stubborn strength. "You didn't hurt me because you didn't care," she said. "You hurt me because you tried." Danny's throat tightened. She took a step back toward the door. Then she paused and looked over her shoulder. "Please," she said softly. "Don't give up." The second attempt happened under lights that felt unforgiving. The fluorescent tubes buzzed faintly overhead, casting a flat, colorless glow across the garage. Outside, the ocean wind moved through. The narrow street, slipping between buildings with a low, restless sound, carried the smell of salt and something colder. Disappointment, maybe, if disappointment had a scent. Danny tightened the last strap of Prototype 2 and stepped back. Alexandra stood a few feet away, phone already in her hand. She hadn't said much since arriving, but her silence was sharp, watchful. This was not trust. It was permission with conditions. Sienna drew a slow breath. She nodded once. "I'm ready," she said. Danny checked the alignment again, then again. The changes were meaningful: new padding, shock absorption, smoother joint response. He believed in the work. Belief he was learning did not guarantee safety. Sienna stood. The brace adjusted. The first step was clean. The second held. Then the third shifted her weight just enough. The pain came fast, deeper this time, radiating upward. Sienna gasped and folded inward, instinctively protecting herself. Danny caught her before. She hit the floor, but the damage was done. Her face drained of color. The brace pressed hard against her hip, wrong in a way that could not be ignored. "No," Alexandra said sharply. "Stop. Stop. Now." Danny eased Sienna back onto the bench, his hands shaking. "I can adjust," he began. "That's it," Alexandra cut in. Her voice was controlled, but the restraint only made it sharper. "I'm calling my attorney." She turned away and dialed, pacing the length of the garage as she spoke in low, urgent phrases. Liability, negligence, unlicensed modification. Sienna sat very still, breathing through the pain. She didn't cry. She just stared at the floor. Danny stepped back as if struck. The words on Alexandra's phone carried more weight than any accusation he could have imagined. This wasn't anger anymore. This was consequence. They left quickly. The door of the Rolls-Royce closed with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. The engine started. The street swallowed it whole. The garage was empty again. Danny stood where he was, his back against the cold concrete wall. He slid down slowly until he was sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, arms hanging uselessly at his sides. The fluorescent lights hummed. The wind outside kept moving. He didn't move for a long time. The brace lay on the workbench, untouched. He didn't look at it. He already knew it was wrong. Knowing that didn't tell him how. Hours passed. The lights flickered once. Then again. Eventually, the sound of quiet footsteps reached him. Zoe stood a few feet away, holding a blanket around her shoulders. Her hair was messy from sleep, her eyes wide and serious. "Dad?" she said softly. Danny lifted his head. "You should be in bed." "I heard the car," she said. "Did it work?" He didn't answer. Zoe walked over and sat beside him on the floor. She leaned against his arm, small and solid. After a moment, she spoke again. "You're not quitting, are you?" Danny closed his eyes. "I don't know." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "If you stop now, you'll think about it forever." He looked at her, startled. "You always think about Uncle Miguel," she added gently. "But you never stopped trying to help people like him." The words landed heavier than any threat. Danny pulled her close, pressing his forehead against her hair. She smelled like soap and pencil shavings. After she went back to bed, Danny stood alone again. This time he turned on the desk lamp. The yellow light cut through the harsh fluorescence, creating a small island of warmth. He pulled the sketches toward him, spreading them across the table. Knees, ankles, springs, sensors, all of it precise, all of it wrong. He stared until his eyes burned. Then something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive like revelation. It was quieter than that. A discomfort. The same one he felt when an engine vibrated at idle because the weight wasn't distributed correctly. His pencil moved without permission. He drew a circle at the knee, crossed it out, another at the ankle, crossed out. Then he stopped. He placed the circle higher. At the hip, his breath caught, the center of balance. Not where motion occurred, but where weight transferred. He saw it clearly now. Every design, his, had forced the body to adapt to the brace. No one had asked the brace to adapt to the body. Danny sat back, heart pounding. He flipped to a clean page and began again. Lines flowed. The design changed entirely. Lighter, smarter, honest. At dawn, he pulled open a drawer and counted his savings. The money he had set aside for Zoe's school lay folded neatly inside. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he closed the drawer. The next day he locked the garage door. A handwritten sign went up. Closed. Back soon. Neighbors asked questions. He waved them off. For 6 days, the garage became a world unto itself. Danny slept in fragments. He tested the design on his own body, strapped it to his legs, walked until he fell, adjusted, tried again. His muscles screamed. He ignored them. On the 7th night, he stood alone beneath the lights, staring at the finished brace. It looked nothing like the others. It looked right. Danny rested his hands on the workbench, his fingers trembling. He thought of Miguel, of Sienna, of Zoe asleep behind the wall. He leaned in close and whispered, to no one and everyone at once. This time, please. The garage had never been this quiet. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath.
No gals craid.
No engines passed. The fluorescent lights overhead did not buzz. They simply stayed on, flat and unwavering, as if time itself had been pinned in place. Danny stood beside the workbench with the new brace resting between his hands. It was lighter than anything he had built before. The joints moved smoothly, without resistance or show. Nothing about it tried to impress. It was honest. Sienna stood a few feet away, her fingers interlaced tightly in front of her. Alexandra was beside her, close enough to touch, her body angled protectively. She hadn't sat down. She hadn't leaned. She was braced the way mothers are when they expect pain. At the edge of the garage, a man Danny had never met before observed in silence. Dr. Raymond Foster. He wore a dark jacket despite the heat. His posture was formal, his expression guarded. 30 years of orthopedic practice showed in the way he watched, carefully, skeptically, as if searching for the precise moment something might go wrong. You understand, Dr. Foster said, his voice measured, that if this fails, there could be permanent damage. Danny nodded.
Ido.
And you're proceeding anyway? Yes. There was no bravado in the answer, no challenge, just fact. Danny knelt in front of Sienna. The concrete felt cool through his jeans. He looked up at her, meeting her eyes, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. You're in control, he said. We stop the second you say stop. Sienna nodded once. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed steady. Alexandra reached for her hand. Sienna squeezed it, then let go. Danny began fitting the brace. Every movement was slow, deliberate. He announced each adjustment, each strap, each alignment point. The sound of the mechanism was barely audible now. No sharp clicks, no protest. Just a soft, compliant response, like something listening closely. Dr. Foster leaned forward, frowning. His eyes tracked the hip assembly, the balance distribution. He didn't speak, but something in his posture shifted. Curiosity edged out disdain. When Danny finished, he didn't stand right away. How does it feel? He asked. Sienna rolled her shoulders gently, testing the weight. Light, she said. Like it's not pulling me anymore. Danny stepped back. He raised his hands slightly, palms open. I won't hold you, he said. I'll stay close, but you need to stand on your own. Sienna inhaled slowly. She placed her hands on the bench and pushed herself up. The first second passed. Nothing happened. She stood. The second passed. Her knees did not shake. The third second passed and something changed in her expression. Not pain. Confusion. Mom, she said softly. It doesn't hurt. Alexandra's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled. Instantly, the tears spilling before she could stop them. Dr. Foster took an involuntary step forward. That's not possible, he murmured. The load. Danny lifted a finger gently. Let her move. Sienna shifted her weight forward. The brace responded. Her right knee bent. 20 degrees. 30. Smooth. Natural. She gasped. Her foot touched the floor. No pain. She took another step. Then another. Each movement unlocked something in her body that had been sealed for 11 years. The brace followed her, not leading, not correcting, supporting. Sienna let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. I'm walking, she said louder now. Mom, I'm walking. Alexandra collapsed to her knees, the sound of it sharp in the silence. She didn't care. She reached out, arms shaking. Sienna took 2 more steps, then broke into a run. It wasn't fast. It wasn't graceful. But it was hers. She ran into her mother's arms. They clung to each other, standing, both of them crying openly now. 11 years of guilt, of pain, of quiet endurance spilled out all at once. Danny stood frozen by the workbench, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles went white. His vision blurred. He saw Miguel's face, clear as day. He felt the echo of that hospital room lift, just slightly. Dr. Foster stared at Sienna's legs as she moved, his mouth open. "The center of balance," he whispered. "You shifted it to the hips." Danny nodded faintly. He couldn't speak. For a moment, the garage belonged to something sacred. Then the world came back. The sound of tires on gravel broke the stillness. A delivery truck stopped at the curb. A man in a pressed shirt stepped out and approached the garage with purposeful strides. "Daniel Kowalski?" he asked. Danny turned. The man held out a thick envelope. Heavy paper. Corporate seal. Danny took it slowly. The logo on the front was unmistakable.
Orthocare Solutions.
Alexandra stiffened. Dr. Foster's expression darkened. Danny opened the envelope. The words were clean, precise, cold. "Cease and desist." His hands began to shake. The letter lay open on the kitchen table, its pages smoothed flat as if calm could be pressed into them. Danny sat on one side, Zoe on the other. Neither of them spoke. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant surf rolling in somewhere beyond the streets. Zoe traced the edge of the paper with her finger. "Is this bad?" she asked. Danny took a breath. That didn't feel big enough. "It means they want me to stop. Are you going to?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Zoe looked up at him. "Didn't you say machines break when people don't listen to them?" Danny nodded slowly. "Then maybe people break for the same reason," she said. The next morning, the story broke. A short video surfaced first. Grainy footage from someone's phone. Sienna standing, walking, running into her mother's arms. It spread faster than Danny could understand. Shared, reposted, dissected. Headlines followed within hours. Unlicensed mechanic claims medical breakthrough. Miracle or menace. By noon, vans lined the street outside the garage. Microphones crowded the air. Flashbulbs popped like small explosions, blinding and relentless. Alexandra stood at the podium she had insisted on setting up herself. Sienna was beside her, on her feet, no wheelchair in sight. Her legs trembled slightly, not from pain, but from the weight of being seen. "My daughter spent 11 years in pain," Alexandra said, her voice steady but sharp. "Not because we lacked resources, but because no one listened to her body." A reporter shouted, "Are you endorsing illegal medical practices?" Sienna stepped forward before her mother could answer. "I'm endorsing being treated like a human being," she said. "Not a product." The room erupted. Danny watched from the edge of the crowd, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The noise pressed in on him from all sides. He had never wanted this. He had wanted one thing to work, one person to walk. Behind the cameras, Dr. Foster stood apart. He waited until the crowd thinned before approaching Danny. "You should know," he said quietly. "I can't publicly support you." Danny nodded. "I figured." Dr. Foster hesitated, then continued. "Years ago, I approved a device that failed. A teenager. Similar case. We followed protocol, trusted the data. He never walked again." He swallowed hard. "I told myself it wasn't my fault," he said, "that I'd done everything right." Danny looked at him. "Did you?" Dr. Foster didn't answer. He pressed a folded sheet of paper into Danny's hand instead. "What's this?" Danny asked. "Internal notes," Foster said. "From Orthocare. Design reviews. They knew about the imbalance. Certain body types were flagged as high risk." Danny's chest tightened. "Then why?" "Because adaptation was cheaper than redesign," Foster said. They assumed patients would endure it. He met Danny's eyes. I won't testify for you, but I won't lie either. That night, the garage lights stayed off. Danny sat alone at the workbench, the brace resting, between his hands like a question with no easy answer. He thought of Miguel, of Sienna's first steps, of Zoe's quiet certainty. A knock sounded at the door. Dr. Victoria Morgan stepped inside, without waiting to be invited. She was older, silver-haired, her expression calm and unreadable. She wore no lab coat, no credentials on display, just a notebook tucked under her arm. I've been following the case, she said. May I see it? Danny handed her the brace. She didn't speak for a long time. She rotated the joints slowly, pressed at the hip assembly, took notes. The silence felt deliberate, respectful. Finally, she looked up. Who taught you to think like this? She asked. No one, Danny said. I just listened. Dr. Morgan's eyes softened. Then you did what many of us forgot how to do. She straightened. I'll testify, and I'll petition the FDA for a supervised provisional license. They'll fight you, Danny said. I know, she replied. But progress always looks illegal before it looks obvious. The FDA hearing was held in a room designed to strip emotion away. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, long table, no, windows. Danny sat between Alexandra and Dr. Morgan. Across from them, representatives from OrthoCare adjusted their ties, stacks of documents arranged with practiced precision. The questions came fast, about liability, about precedent, about regulation. Dr. Morgan answered calmly. Dr. Foster spoke when asked, his voice steady, his words careful. He did not defend Danny outright. He did not condemn him either. Sienna watched from the back of the room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. At the end, the panel members conferred in hushed tones. The chairwoman stood. We will deliberate and issue a decision. The guards opened the door. Everyone stood. As Danny stepped into the hallway, the door swung shut behind them with a dull, final sound. No verdict followed, just waiting. The letter arrived on a quiet morning, slipped beneath the door without ceremony. Danny read it standing at the kitchen counter, the light pale and gentle through the window. The words were careful, measured, unmistakably official. Provisional license, supervised practice, immediate effect. He sat down slowly, the paper trembling in his hands. Zoe watched him from the doorway. Is it good news? Danny nodded. He tried to speak and couldn't. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her cheek against his chest the way she always had when things finally felt safe. It means, he said at last, I get to keep listening. The center opened 3 months later in a low, unassuming building near the edge of town. No glass walls. No polished marble. Just wide windows that let sunlight pour in and settle where it pleased.
Kowalski Mobility Solutions.
Inside, the air smelled faintly of new paint and warm metal. The floors were clean but not pristine. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Treatment tables stood beneath skylights, bathed in soft daylight. Near the entrance, a small plaque caught the light, dedicated to Miguel Kowalski, who believed movement was hope. Danny stopped in front of it every morning before unlocking the door. He never rushed past it. Sienna was already there most days when he arrived. She wore comfortable clothes now, moved easily, her stride still deliberate but no longer guarded. She had started training as a physical therapy assistant, studying late into the night, learning how to guide others through the same fear she had once lived inside. Alexandra came too, though she never hovered anymore. She sat in the waiting area reading, sometimes watching the people who came through the door with an expression that had softened into something like humility. The first patient arrived early. A woman stood just outside the entrance, hesitating. Her clothes were worn, carefully mended. She held a folder against her chest as if it might slip away. Beside her stood a small boy with braces that had seen better days, their metal dull and scarred. Danny opened the door himself. Good morning, he said. Come in. The woman's voice shook. We don't have much money. Danny smiled gently. You don't need it. He knelt in front of the boy, bringing himself level just as he always did. He studied the way the child stood, the subtle lean, the quiet compensation. What's your name? Danny asked. Ethan, the boy said. Danny nodded. Show me how you walk right now. The woman covered her mouth, tears spilling before she could stop them. It was the first time anyone had asked that question without paperwork or conditions attached. Word spread the way meaningful things often do, quietly, through shared glances in waiting rooms, through families who had learned to expect disappointment and found something else instead. Danny never advertised. He didn't need to. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sienna met Alexandra at Pacific Beach. The tide was gentle, the water catching the last light of day and breaking it into gold. They walked together across the sand. When Sienna reached the shoreline, she stopped. The ocean rolled forward, touching her toes. She laughed softly, surprised by the coolness, by the sensation she had once feared she would never feel again. I don't hate it anymore, she said. Alexandra watched her, tears gathering but no longer heavy with guilt. Neither do I. They stood together as the waves moved around their ankles, the past loosening its grip with every retreating line of foam. Back at the center, Danny locked up for the night. The rooms were quiet, the light lingering a moment longer before he switched it off. He paused at the plaque, resting his hand there, steady and familiar. I kept my promise, he whispered. Outside, the street was calm. The air carried the scent of salt and evening. Danny walked home with Zoe, their shadows long and connected beneath the fading sky. She looked up at him, thoughtful. Do you think Uncle Miguel can see it? She asked. Danny smiled. I think he always could. They reached the corner, the sound of the ocean faint but constant. Danny glanced back once at the building, at the quiet windows holding so many beginnings. Tomorrow more people would come. More stories would arrive. More careful listening. For now, it was enough to stand still and let the day settle. Somewhere behind him, a child took a step without fear.